Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. We're periodically joined by the North Carolina Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mark Johnson, and that is the case today. And I'm looking forward to this conversation in light of the concerns that the legislature, all three chambers, that's the House, the Senate, and yes, I'll say this chamber, the governor's office, all have expressed a great deal of concern related to construction needs for schools and schools campuses. So with that, Superintendent Mark Johnson with us this evening. Mark, good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to talk to you again.
Always a pleasure. Let's talk here, starting right out on the issue of the bond referendum, let me put it this way, the call by all parties that we need to do something about our school systems, our structures. What is the current situation related to our North Carolina schools facilities?
Yeah, thanks. This is actually really good news. You have, as you mentioned, every branch of government coming out and saying, yes, we support in a bipartisan way that we need to get billions of dollars out to counties that need it the most to not just update schools, but also, especially now after the storm, we're at the 6-month anniversary just passed of Florence hitting. We need to build back, but we need to build back better and stronger so that all students, no matter where they are in North Carolina, have the opportunity to be in safe environments that are 21st century learning opportunities. So we are excited because the differences are not among whether we should do it or not, it's how we do it. And the North Carolina State Senate has come up with a very good plan. They say, okay, let's take out of funds that we collect each year and let's do a kind of pay-as-we-go plan. So that year we'll assess what the top needs are, and we will just give the money to those districts. The NC House has a traditional plan that's also a good plan, which is for a bond referendum that would be given to the voters in North Carolina to approve, and that would actually identify the projects that would be done over the course of the next decade using that funding. And the governor's come out in support of a bond, but his is twice as much as the North Carolina House of Representatives. So, again, to summarize, the good news is that there is bipartisan agreement that we need to get state funding to help local school districts with school construction and renovation to update schools. What we're going to find out over the long summer ahead, the long General Assembly session, is exactly how we go about doing that. And I think that's where the differences are. That's where you're going to have the governor's office negotiating with the Senate, negotiating with the House. We will come to some understanding by the end of the summer. But the good news is everyone agrees we've got to get money out to rural North Carolina and eastern North Carolina to really help build back stronger than ever before.
Our guest again, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Department of Public Instruction, Mark Johnson. Mark, two quick questions, technical questions, if you will, related to the bond and the local school boards and things of this nature. Should the school boards at this point begin looking at, if you will, priorities? Because obviously in some instances, I say obviously, I'm confident in some instances, the punch list may be 10 or 20 items long. However, the funding won't necessarily cover all of the wish list. What about those for the local school systems? Have you been in communications with them to say, okay, it looks like it's going to happen, but start putting together a priority list of some nature?
Absolutely, and that work has been going on for quite some time. I'm very excited. When I first got into office in 2017, we actually worked with the General Assembly to open up more lottery money for school construction.
Right.
That's originally why we got this education lottery. We want more money to go to those districts that need it so desperately. A great example is I'm going to be visiting the grand opening in August for the new Jones County school. And Jones County was an example of a county that even if they, tried to do a bond referendum or raise taxes, they just weren't going to be able to raise enough funds to replace their outdated school with a true 21st century safe learning environment. So they are actually able to use lottery funds from the state through that program. So a lot of school districts that are in the most need have already been identifying projects They already are well down the road to making sure that the state knows what they need to do. And so we're excited to continue that conversation and now have even more state funding to infuse. We talk a lot about rural-urban divide, and it is real. And the best way we can close the rural-urban divide is through education. Education is truly the great equalizer of opportunity. Every student should be able to go to a school where they have great resources, they are safe, and they have the ability to work hard and reach their American dream.
Again, Mark, I want to get back to the issue of security on campuses in relationship to, literally the security of the students. But before we do that, let's go to a caller. We've got Bob in Morehead City joining us. Bob, good afternoon. Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mark Johnson, with us this evening. Yes, sir.
Superintendent, you got one of the most important jobs in North Carolina. I hope you realize that. Let me throw you a softball question. What is going on with these liberal teachers teaching Islam, but we can't teach God and Jesus Christ in our schools?
Wow.
Well, you're going to have to send me those examples, because I do know people are concerned about that. But I'll have to see those examples firsthand. I can tell you this. This is kind of brings us down to another topic, and that's what is being taught in our schools. We are working hard with other people here in Raleigh. We want to get some things done for our schools. One, we want to make sure that every high school student will graduate with at least one course in financial literacy. That means being able to balance a checkbook. That is not a requirement right now. We're looking at how we can insert that into high schools all across the state so that we get those skills to the high schoolers that need so much. And to your listener's question, I think what's important to know is we are working to get the founding principles back into our classrooms. We do have history courses, but as people have probably seen over the past couple of years, they have been chopped up and shifted around. We want to make sure that the founding principles are taught in our high school history courses, which many teachers do. We want to make sure that is part of every course, because we need students understanding why we have a democracy, how that was formed, and why it is so important, or else we might not have a democracy one day. We need students. We're not going to tell students what to believe one way or the other, but we do want them to be educated on why we have the system we have.
Bob, very quickly, do you know of a circumstance in North Carolina that neither our guest nor I know at this point, where a situation has occurred where there's teaching of a particular religious component, but not others?
Yes, Todd Starnes had a good example on his radio show today on your station about a child having to recite the Islam devotion, and they had to write a paper on why they should transfer or convert to the Islam religion.
Okay, no, wait. With the one issue, though, that had nothing to do with North Carolina. Am I correct on that?
That is going on in our schools. The liberal teachers...
Okay, nationally, yeah. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, that does bring up an issue. We'll talk about that at some point, is the influence of these national issues on the local school systems. But right now, nothing in North Carolina that we know of, right, Bob?
I'll try to find some.
Okay, thank you very much. Please get back in touch with us. Bob, thanks very much for the call. I appreciate that. I've got to argue with you, Superintendent, before we go to the break. Balance a checkbook. Excuse me. The vast majority of the millennials out there don't even know what a checkbook is. And if you were asked them to go to the teller at the bank, they would say, the who? The what? What does a teller do? All right, seriously, I applaud the effort to get financial literacy out there, but I have to question the value of a checkbook.
All right, well, it can be, financial literacy on your app, whatever it is. I mean, now it might be more important than ever.
Oh, no, it will be. Oh, wait.
That's exactly right. If you just have If you don't have a checkbook and you just have this money that looks like on your phone that is coming out of thin air, that's important.
This brings up a good question. I'm going to take a quick break here with our guest, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mark Johnson. This is not one of our questions, but I do want to get back to the question of security. But since we talked on financial literacy, I do want to chat about this, Superintendent, about teaching students. This is a particular personal issue for me, about the value of college, but also the cost of college. I'm curious your observations on that. Then we're going to get back to the issue of security and construction of schools. Our guest this afternoon, Superintendent Mark Johnson, of course, Department of Public Instruction, North Carolina. Stay with us for more here on Viewpoints. And if you've got a question, you're welcome to join us. 252 area code 247-7282. Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107 AM 1240. Got another caller standing by, but before I get to the caller, very quickly for you, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mark Johnson. Mark, quick question on the issue of financial well-being and, of course, financial literacy, which I greatly appreciate, and I think that's an excellent idea. But what about for graduating seniors? I complain bitterly about this almost on a daily basis. $1.5 trillion of college debt, students going off to college without any real goals. Is there a plan possibly in the future, maybe in existence right now, where high school juniors and seniors will get some guidance and some real, financial guidance for their academic career?
Absolutely. We have already started that because the first step is what we are doing to change the narrative around what success after school looks like.
All right, stop right there. We are
very much, we're very much passionate by not every student has to go to four-year college.
Okay.
So we're telling them that.
All right, hold on. The reason I asked you to stop right there, because I have a feeling this is what our caller is going to ask you. Ernie and Emerald Isle, good afternoon.
No, Lockwood, I'm not going to talk about college.
No, but I'm talking about careers beyond college.
You know how I feel about the value of college education versus learning a trade and keeping busy and productive.
All right.
That's not why I'm calling. I do sympathize with Bob's comments, but unless you can document something, you can't use talk radio to document what your thoughts are, and I share his concerns. But the other thing I want to talk about was young people learning economics. Mm-hmm. I'm a small business person, and every once in a while I run into a customer that
doesn't get it.
Asks me, "Do you take credit cards?"
Uh-huh.
And my answer is no. I said, I'll take a check. I haven't written a paper. I don't, okay. How about cash? Cash. There's a big problem with this.
No, you're absolutely right, Ernie. And of course,
you know exactly where I'm coming from.
I do. Yeah. Thank you very much, Ernie. I appreciate that. That's very important. Okay, Superintendent Mark Johnson, I think you got the message on that one related to. I think it's an excellent idea to teach them.
I think it builds right into financial literacy.
Yeah, and I think
right into the idea of the basics of being able to control your finances and understanding, to his point, why not every small store would want to accept credit cards, knowing what it actually costs them to accept credit cards.
Good point to both you and Ernie on pointing that out. You're absolutely right. All right, I think we've touched on the issue of financial literacy and, of course, the topic as I talked about just a moment ago, and thank you very much for changing the narrative relative to future opportunities, and we're seeing this in early college experiences throughout the state. The other question, though, back to the issue of facilities and cost and the bond referendum, the topic of security, and, of course, I think that's probably the issue has become more of a concern just in the past 72, 96 hours, in which we have learned more about the experience in New Zealand, sadly, the issue of security on campus. And, of course, the topic of there's debate right now in the legislature over the issue of arming teachers. I'd be interested in your observations on that. But first and foremost, the topic of security on campuses, especially campuses that were built in the 60s and 70s where no one ever questioned the concern associated with security. Is that part of the issue of this new bond referendum, Superintendent?
Yes. And first, let me say that after Parkland High School tragedy happened last year, we went to the General Assembly and we asked for immediate funds to handle that exact situation you're talking about. We got grant money out to schools that really needed it the most. For example, schools that were maybe built in the 70s that had a much more open design that I visited myself, and you have one building to another building, they needed funds just simply to put up not fences to make it look like a prison, but just, sturdy fences, metal barricades to stop anyone who just wanted to walk through the campus from being able to just walk right through all the multiple buildings. So they got funding to put up those types of preventative measures so that all visitors have to go through one single entrance where they go in through a security check. So things like that are important. But ultimately, yes, I mean, some of these schools, especially the much, much, much older ones, it's just a matter of they're ending the life cycle of the building, and it's a different time now, and we need to look at getting those funds out to rural North Carolina so they can build new buildings in place with security in mind.
All right, and I've got to bring up the topic, and it's a little contentious, but I'm just curious, and it's early on. I say that because it's a discussion being had right now in the legislature, the possibility of arming teachers. Your opinion? Any studies so far on that, by any chance?
Well, and I can just tell you my opinion. I've been very upfront about this. I am a Republican. I am a supporter of the Second Amendment. But I've also been a teacher. I've been in that situation. And I can tell you that so many things can pop up that it is not the best idea to have a gun on a teacher. Let me tell you, I hear from a lot of teachers who are former military, former law enforcement. They might be teaching in a high school ROTC class or a high school shop class. They say, no, I can handle it. Let me bring my firearm. I think there is a path forward we can discuss, but it's much more along the lines of teachers getting the training and then there being a secure area where a firearm is kept, not on the teacher. I tell people all the time, teachers are naturally protective of their students. I know from when I was in my classroom, if some kind of disruption started, and by disruption I mean it could be a fight between two students, teachers are naturally going to jump in and try to stop that fight. Heaven forbid there is a firearm on a teacher, and that unfortunately gets into the wrong hands. You could actually end up with a tragedy, even though you have a perfectly qualified teacher with that firearm. You've got a new tragedy on your hands just because of that. I get a retort sometimes by people who say, "Oh, well, we could invest in a special gun that only can fire when the certain person holds in." Then I say, okay, I understand that we can come up with something for every scenario, but that's also going to cost a lot of dollars. Let's first invest our dollars into getting a school resource officer into every school. That is a trained law enforcement official. Their main duty is to protect and serve the students and teachers of that school. Let's get them into our schools first and talk about making sure every school has one of those so that they can be there to prevent, if heaven forbid the worst happens, but also be there as a deterrent because people will know that there's a trained law enforcement officer there, but also importantly to be there as a great connection to the community. I've been into schools, especially elementary schools, where they have very, very kind school resource officers who are building a relationship with the community, which is something that really will help us with school safety going into the future. Our guest, and I thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Department of Public Instruction, North Carolina, Mark Johnson. Mark, stay with me. I'll chat with you briefly off air about further conversations about several of the topics we discussed this evening and others we didn't get to. Stay tuned for more here on Viewpoints on the Talk Station, FM 107, AM 1240.